Okay. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I am Sela from the A Center. Welcome to HELiX Focus Session. Our session today will be hosted by Humanitarian Logistics Association. Ms. Claire, the session is yours.
Thank you so much, and thank you everyone for joining me, wherever you are in the world. My name is Travers, as you can see, and I'm the coordinator and co-founder of the Local Procurement Learning Partnership, which is a new initiative that the HLA is hosting. And that's what this session will be about today. I'm going to give a brief introduction to what the Local Procurement Learning Partnership is designed to do. And then I'd like to talk about some of the challenges to procuring locally during humanitarian response and resiliency building activities, before opening the floor to discuss whether those challenges resonate with you or whether there are challenges that you feel are missing from what we already have. So, the Local Procurement Learning Partnership is a multi-stakeholder partnership hosted in the HLA, or the Humanitarian Logistics Association, of both global and local actors, and is designed to improve the timely, relevant, and efficient use of local procurement in humanitarian response and resiliency building activities. The Local Procurement Learning Partnership is built on the premise that the future of aid is local, and that localizing procurement offers us the opportunity to engage directly with affected populations. As such, the Learning Partnership will ask us to rethink the ways that we procure, of course, but also the ways that we program activities, the ways that we ascribe value as practitioners. It's more than a procurement initiative. It represents a practical step in the localization agenda, reinvesting capital from the aid industrial complex into local markets and local economies. I'm going to talk a little bit now about some of the challenges that we have so far identified to local procurements. And these have been organised as the challenges that the procurement officers within aid organisations face, and the procurement challenges or selling challenges that manufacturers and vendors face to accessing our procurement channels. So, of course, many actors in the sector do procure locally. Many of the goods and services, in fact, there are some very good statistics out there for some organisations, but seldom to full potential and seldom with the kind of backstop evidence that the LPLP is seeking to provide. There is the first one on here, the little symbol of the cash. There is a latent belief that quality and or quantity of items cannot be sourced from local markets and supply chains. And whilst this may be true in some circumstances, equivalents and suitable alternatives are available, and technological enablers such as digital fabrication and maker labs are only going to increase this potential in the future. There is also a lack of awareness of the emerging evidence and modalities for indirectly utilising local supply chains in emergencies. Often we as humanitarian aid organisers, we just sort of let the markets recover at their own pace, quite passively. And we do not yet have the oversight to really be sure about the impact of our presence in a context at all. Practitioners of a response seldom feel that they have a solid grasp of how to assess the local markets for specific non-food items. So there is a lack of unified market reviews and analysis. And finally, pre-positioned stocks of standard supplies often feel safer and simpler and faster for procurement officers within aid organisations. Now, these are just four of the common challenges to engaging with local markets and supply chains that we have had fed back to us by NGO procurement officers and INGO logistics and supply chain management experts. I will ask some people now to see if any of these are resonating with you. And also whether there are any of these that are missing for this before we move into the challenges that local vendors and suppliers face to accessing our procurement channels. So at this point, I would like to invite anybody that has thoughts on these four challenges or any other challenges to locally procure to come off their mute. You can also, by all means, come off of your turn on your camera if that's possible. And I just want to know if these are challenges that you have faced, or whether these 4 challenges are something new to you. And finally, if there's anything missing. You can see we have a few more people joining.
Miss Claire, I think we haven't got any question yet. Maybe we can proceed to the next slide. Thank you.
That's fine. Okay, so I'm going to move on to some of the challenges that we've identified to engaging with procurement mechanisms. Now, these are challenges that have been fed back from local vendors, sellers, and manufacturers face when trying to engage in aid procurement mechanisms. First is financial. Access to adequate credit to manufacture or to purchase parts for items is seldom available in the immediate aftermath of a crisis. Aid procurement systems typically require full payment at the end of the delivery of goods, requiring a seller or a maker to have access to pre-financing. And whilst we've seen microfinance products crop up to fill that need in the food sector, we haven't really seen the same in non-food items in the industry. Also under finance, there is one-to-one contracting systems, which most aid procurement falls under. We prefer, generally speaking, a larger contract with a single supplier. So smaller manufacturing, digital fabrication, network manufacturing, and local vending would probably be better suited to an all-to-one contract type in order for the aid system to accommodate the innovation and the changes that they are bringing to the table. So this would be a situation where we would be able to contract to a multitude of people to produce many of these items under one contract. And we have seen people begin to use this. I believe in South America, there's been a push for this. The next is assurance. Because each organisation has its own item specifications, there is not necessarily a consistent item spec list, and little awareness of the standards that are being required for the people who are making or vending these items. There's also a requirement on our end to ensure the quality of the pieces that we are purchasing to be distributed. But quality assurance and insurance for a small trader is quite a high burden. It's quite difficult to do. And we have seen, especially in COVID recently, that during a COVID response, we have integrated into a livelihoods program to provide masks or water sanitation stations. But once that program has ended, the procurement, quality assurance, the insurance that we require is not possible for a small collaboration of individuals or a small trader. Finally, under assurance, there is the burden of reporting and due diligence, and this has been actually fed back to us by both the vendors and also the procurement officers. We currently have a huge financial burden, a huge financial health, quality assurance audit, due diligence, safeguarding. We have a huge burden of reporting that we put onto our suppliers because we want to, I understand why they're there, but we have to be very realistic that this burden of reporting does present as a barrier to entering our aid procurement mechanisms for small traders, local vendors, and networked manufacturing who do not have the capacity to produce this kind of reporting and due diligence. Finally, one of the common challenges to engaging in the aid procurement mechanisms that we've heard from local vendors and suppliers and manufacturers is transport. Obviously, affected infrastructure and cost are the two areas of this, but the overall challenge is that getting an item that you are producing to the regional preposition points is very difficult, especially in island nations, Pacific Island nations, Indonesia, etc. The cost and the burden on the supplier to make these available for packaging at a regional distribution point, only to potentially be re-entered into the country as part of a pack, this is often so costly that it stops them from being able to engage in our aid procurement mechanisms altogether. So this is where I would like to call on you again. The challenges that I have put out, I would like to know if they resonate with you. What challenges are missing? And what challenges might our fees may be the biggest? I really hope that we would get a small period of time here where we can have a conversation, and then I will be presenting the framework for activities that the Local Procurement Learning Partnership is in the process of developing. I'm going to pause here now and ask people to come raise their hands so the moderator can call on you, or to drop your comments and questions in the box, as Shella has kindly noted in the chat, if you can't speak. These challenges that I've raised have been the result of a number of consultations like this, but we only really can expand on them if we get the feedback, so that's what I'd like to do at this point. We're not a huge group, so I feel like we can definitely get the conversation going without a breakout room.
Okay, participants, so if you have any questions or concern about the presentation so far, kindly drop in the chat box. Maybe we could proceed to the next slide, Ms. Claire.
I really would like to get comments if there are any. The next part of the presentation is on a different topic.
So participants, if you have any concern or comments, please don't hesitate to put it in our chat box. We would like to hear anything from you. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll just wait for a couple of minutes. If there aren't any comments, I will move on, of course. Okay, not a talkative bunch today. Usually people are so excited to tell me about their challenges, but not today. Maybe it's quite early over here. I do know it's in your afternoon.
Maybe it's already late time for us, but
yeah, maybe it's time for a break.
Oh, okay. Oh, finally, we have a question from Miss Catherine Harris.
Yeah.
I just wonder if the skills and knowledge required for some of the more complex procurements are easily found in humanitarian sector. I will put in.
There we go. Thank you. Yeah, great question. Are the skills required for complex? What do you mean by complex? More complex procurements? Can you clarify what you mean in that situation, please, Catherine?
Yeah, I mean, I guess some of the service contracts or some of the more complicated kits with multiple items, or some of the new and emerging technologies being used by the humanitarian sector, sometimes they're quite difficult to procure. So do we know whether there's any skill gaps around how to undertake the procurement processes and engage with the market in those sorts of situations?
Absolutely, it's a really great point. I think that you've highlighted two very different types of complex items, right? To procure, like the kits versus anything with emerging technologies, usually not being procured from the same place. I would be interested to know from you why you think those are difficult to procure. Like, what are the challenges that our ordinary, let's say, procurement officer from NGO X would face in trying to procure those over, for example, menstrual cups or a single item.
Sure. I think, you know, sometimes they take, you have to engage the market ahead of time, but still following organizational procedures. There might be a lot of market research required. So I am sort of interested from this local procurement learning partnership, whether there'll be training as something has been identified as needed, particularly to do more difficult and procurements that aren't straightforward. And if that's something that's needed by the sector.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's absolutely needed by the sector in these common challenges that sort of procurement officer faces. A lot of this is about awareness of markets, and as you're quite right in saying that often you require sort of a longer term view of the markets in order to integrate complex items with multiple networks, multiple suppliers, multiple makers. And you're absolutely correct. So this is something that's being fed back and something that we will be geared to hopefully respond to. After we finish this round of comments, I'll present the framework for activities so you can see what our sort of plan of action is. Anyone else want to comment on any of these challenges, or feels that there is a challenge missing? It's also very helpful to know.
Yeah, so basically I already put in our chat box.
Oh, fantastic.
There is another 2 questions from Amazing Our Participant. One from Rani Rahmania. As you can read, hi, in engaging all communities, including the supplier, it's important to understand the cultural sensitivity. Do you have any experience on this?
Yes, absolutely. Rani, can you come off of mute and maybe explain how you feel like the cultural sensitivity for integrating suppliers presents as a challenge in our procurement processes? If you're not able to come off mute, I understand. I'm just going to give you the opportunity.
Okay. Hi, Claire. Thank
Hi.
you. Yeah. Okay. It's very exciting about knowing about how to engage a local community, particularly suppliers. You know, there is a lot of things that we need to do assess before we engage them, and the important for my experience is to understand how the cultural sensitivity, and of course how to overcome the language barriers. So I really want to know if you have any experience on this. Thank you.
Thank you. I think you're absolutely right. Both making sure it's culturally appropriate items are being procured in ways that are dignified to the local community. And this language barrier that you mentioned is a fantastic point. I'll definitely be adding it to our next presentation of challenges. Thank you so much. Often some of these procurement sort of calls, these tenders of trainings aren't available in all languages, including this presentation, and that of course is a barrier. So that is a really great addition. Thank you so much. We also have a message from Alexi from SHERP. What is the shortest way from transportation solution provider to humanitarian operator in terms of sharing info and presenting products? Alexi, can I give you the opportunity to come off of mute and explain your question a little bit more? The shortest way from transportation solution provider to humanitarian operator. Go ahead.
Yeah, hello.
Hi.
Yeah, my question comes from, so idea of the question is that we are current United Nations transportation provider, and we are producer of SHERP all-terrain vehicles that are currently working in United Nations World Food Program contracts in Africa. But if we are talking about ASEAN countries, I see that they often face the challenges of different disaster, and as far as I see, the transportation capabilities are still not perfect. So as a vehicle producer, my question, what is the shortest way in terms of presenting our products that already proved to be reliable servants in humanitarian operations? How can we present them to the ASEAN members? yeah, in short, it's like this.
Thank you. This is a really great question. I think that it really highlights that the challenges in one place location that you mentioned that you're currently operational in Africa, there's going to be slightly different challenges when you move context, right? And do we need the same transportation solutions, or do we need different ones? I would be interested to hear from anyone else, as we have some ASEAN participants here. Alexi, can I ask you to go back off mute for me, please?
Sorry?
Sorry. Okay. Sorry, Alexia, put you back on mute just because there was a lot of background noise. But I was just saying that the point that you have raised, I think, is really, really valuable. So the transportation solutions for one geographic context and cultural context will not necessarily be appropriate to another. So you've mentioned that SHERP is currently using transportation solutions that they have created in Africa context, but maybe there are different challenges in Asian context. So I would be interested to hear from anyone in the audience, actually, if this is something that that they have come across, that the transportation solution providers from one context to another can easily translate, or whether it's something that's better for a local transportation solution provider to fill that role. Does anyone have any comments in response to Alexi's question? It's written in the chat as well if anyone would like to see.
I think we haven't got any more questions. Maybe we could proceed to the next. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, guys. If you do have any more comments about these challenges, please just drop them in the chat and we'll maybe swing back to them at the end. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to present our framework for activities. Now, this is still in a draft version. We'll be running a workshop in the next sort of 30 days or so about this in order to finalize it. The framework for activities, much like the Cash Learning Partnership, the Local Procurement Learning Partnership seeks to support organisations and practitioners to routinely consider local procurement and to enable the local potential in humanitarian and development contexts around the world in order to improve the timely, relevant and efficient use of local procurement. And the 4 ways that we feel that this will be the strongest are capacity strengthening, technological innovation, and policy advice. Under each of these, we have 5 pillars of understandings. We have buyers, sellers, donors, programs, and cash flow. And this sort of creates quite a large framework, as you can imagine, like a massive Excel spreadsheet, which I've chosen not to show you here just because it's quite huge. But under each of these, there is an intersection, right? So under the buyers and capacity strengthening, I think this is what Alexi was, sorry, not Alexi, what Catherine was asking earlier, was this question about whether there's a need to skill up and have better general understandings of complex procurement patterns that would come under capacity strengthening and the buyers section, whereas capacity strengthening for example, the sellers would be about meeting the burden of reporting that is required. Do local communities, including the suppliers, have the information that they need in order to reach those thresholds for us? When we're talking about technological innovation, this is integrating not only sort of the best new knowledge with the technical advice, but also integrating things like all-to-one blockchain supported contracts, digital fabrication, emerging technologies. And again, each of these will be intersected by one of our pillars. So for example, technological innovations with programs would be using something like a cash voucher assistance program in order to allow people to purchase local items that are available on their market using their either card or their phone. Something that we've seen go quite well in food programs around the world, and still has had sort of a limited application when it comes to things like PPE, public health, menstrual hygiene management, etc. The third area, information sharing, is That's what it says on the tin. As per the impact statement for the HLA, the Local Procurement Learning Partnership is tasked with providing a space for thought leadership to come together and to engage everyone in our sector and beyond in a process of sharing information through events like this, through webcasts, podcasts, and of course our newsletter. I will now be sharing a quick link. If you'd like to join the Local Procurement Learning Partnership newsletter, you can go to this website that I've put in the chat. At the moment, this is the fastest way of getting information about what we are doing, including about this framework. Now, information sharing will look different for, again, everyone in our 5 pillars. As Rani pointed out, sometimes this information is not tailored to the local context in both language and cultural sensitivity. So how can we better engage with buyers to make sure that their tenders are put out in local languages? How can we better engage in the discussions that we're having to build trust in different contexts around the world? I would be very interested to hear if anyone has any points or comments about the sort of trust, underlying trust problem. Maybe that's something I'll lead back to in a minute. Because I think this is something that's come up in a lot of our conversations, was that there is a need to build good investment in the local context around the world that have maybe a complicated history with global aid. The final one is policy advice. So this is very much tailored towards creating better policies in our sector. This may be policies that are about new and emerging tech, where that doesn't currently have a policy. For example, the integration of makerspaces into our suppliers and our makers. There is no current policy available for this, but we do recently have a data standard that will help us to map manufacturers around the world. And for example, when we're looking at the donor pillar of our programs, this area for activities becomes quite important. Oftentimes there is a limit on what buyers can do, because donors have made very strict policies which are put in place for safeguarding and for very positive reasons. However, how can we better tailor this policy advice in order to help the donors and the INGOs achieve their respective goals when it comes to localization, specifically through local procurement? As I said, this framework for activities has been generated as a draft. It's currently in its 2nd iteration. The Local Procurement Learning Partnership has been through this with their steering group, which has been populated to quorum at the moment. The framework for activities has not been finalised yet, and one of the things that we're looking to do is to run a bespoke workshop on this. So we would like to invite everyone that is here today, of course, to join that. This framework for activities will basically be our sort of global document for our partners to join us in improving the timely, relevant and efficient use of local procurement in global response around the world. I want to quickly just tell you about the ways that you can stay involved with us. So first of all, as I've said, you're invited to give feedback on the framework for activities in May. This may now be June because of the long weekend coming up. So if you go to localprocurement.org, there is a sign up sheet to sign up for a monthly informational bulletin. This will give you a link to sign up to get an invite to that framework for activities workshop. The first one on this list, if you like, at the top, is about providing a testimonial on supply chain failures during COVID-19. One of the things that the Local Procurement Learning Partnership is doing as tasked by the HLA is presenting case studies about local procurements from around the world. And via that channel. We have been with the kind support of the Lloyd's Register and the Royal Academy of Engineering. We're conducting a case study called Analysing Humanitarian Supply Chain Failures, Crashes and Recovery After COVID-19. If you have had any experience of bottlenecks, price hikes, supply chain issues between February to October of 2020, I would really encourage you to send me an email so we can get you potentially set up for an interview. That interview is anonymized and redacted, so there won't be any information shared in the final analysis that would be telling of your organization, yourself, or your job. Okay, I now want to go back to this framework for activities. I would love to hear from people about what they feel should be falling within these 4 areas of the framework, since we have some extra time. I don't think everyone is super discussive today. I was expecting some more discussion. But I would love to hear from you guys about what is available already, maybe that we have overlooked, and also what of these you think would be the thing that you would want to use the Local Procurement Learning Partnership for, possible.
Yes, for the participants, we would like to hear from you on this session. So please don't hesitate to ask any question or sharing your experience on this area. We would like to hear.
Claire, it's me again, but I wonder if there's a little bit more to the capacity strengthening element. Certainly, I know that different government agencies and humanitarian response agencies can have quite different procurement policies. How do you plan to address the capacity strengthening element if agencies and government responders are using different procurement policies?
This is such a good point. Thank you so much, Catherine. I think one of our big tasks will be engaging with those organizations and seeing where there are synergies that can be created and common standards that can be achieved. Because you're right, it's incredibly difficult for the organizations and the vendors when all of the specs for different organizations, all of the processes are slightly different, and all of the item specifications are also different. One of the things that we would be very interested in doing is making that one of the first things that we have to do. So we have to be speaking to people that are advocating for standardization of procurement procedures, including item specs, price lists, due diligence, to lower the barrier of entry to local actors. And we've actually put that under our donor pillar. We feel that going to the donors directly and advocating for standardization across all of the programs, no matter who the implementer is, would potentially be the best and quickest way. I'd love to hear if you think that is the case, but that's our assumption. I'm looking behind you at the full draft of this framework, which I suppose I could just share on my screen actually. Shadow, is it okay if I stop sharing and switch screens?
Sure, yes.
Yeah, since we have some more time, I will endeavor to show you guys a more complete. Please let me know when you can see this.
Yeah, it's clear.
Thank you so much. So Catherine, is it Catherine? I really hope I'm saying that incorrectly, I'm sorry.
Yes, that's correct.
Great, thank you. And so you can see here, advocate for standardization of procurement procedures does come under capacity strengthening, but actually from donors. I think one of the things that we've heard fed back from people that are in the sector is this slightly different procedures, slightly different item specifications. But what's interesting is that we've had that fed back from both vendors and manufacturers, suppliers, and from procurement officers within aid programs, and not from donors. So we have a sneaking suspicion that donors don't realise quite how difficult this can be. and maybe some more advocacy on that would be helpful. Do you feel like that's the right place for this to come? I'd be interested to know.
Gosh, I'm not too sure, but I guess you could take two approaches, and going through the donors, maybe take the approach of coming from the top down. Bottom up approach might be saying, well, you know, where do we already have similarities and build on that. But I have no doubt that that will be a challenging element.
It will be. I mean, all of these individual squares could be a whole advocacy team in itself. But we're trying to build this out to be as comprehensive as possible, so that we really have a good understanding of all of the change that needs to happen. And then we can sort of choose which of these can be most quickly achieved, which of these can be done through collaboration, which of these are very long term, and maybe this standardization question is longer term. Although I will say that the HLA has done some amazing work in standardization recently. They've launched their Universal Logistics Standards, which is being added to the Sphere standard. I believe it's in field trials at the moment. And that has been a really, I think, important step in our industry. Some people think that standardization is the enemy of localization, but I tend to disagree. I think the two can coexist quite beautifully. Since we have the SAPA, maybe I'll just go through some more examples. Unless if anyone has any questions, Shoda, can you please just tell me, since I now can't see the chat. So, yes?
Yeah, I think no one has dropped any other question anymore. So yeah, if I would like to remind again, if you have any question, don't hesitate to put in the chat box or raise your hand, and I will identify your name and to talk with the Claire.
So when I said this was a huge document, and I'm totally not going to show you, apparently I immediately wavered on that and showed you this massive document. As I said, we're running a workshop specifically on this, so please don't feel overwhelmed by this or feel the need to read every little bit. I think some of the key things we have already mentioned, right? We have here the advocating for standards, which Catherine has said might also be good to have a bottom-up approach that kind of meets in the middle. Trialing microfinance products under the cash flow would be something to do with capacity strengthening. There's already a product out there, has been tailored and made suitable for crisis response in local communities that isn't food-based. Under programs, we're thinking of using this term enhanced procurement. So basically, this is the use of identifying some key products and services that is regularly used across many areas, and linking this with a livelihoods program so that you can procure from yourself in a way. You're procuring from the livelihoods program. So we saw this trialed in Malawi when they were making masks using a fistula survivors group who were already making other things. They pivoted and made masks, which then UNFPA could purchase for use by their staff members in their everyday programming. We've also seen this in, I believe it's Kenya. We have a great case study of people making water points as part of their vocational training, which could then be procured by the same organization. This is a programming approach that would use enhanced procurement, for example. And kind of identifying the ways that we can help other people to run similar programs. Technological innovations, we have obviously here there is the inclusion of common marketplace assessment tools to expand the scope to NFI markets and procurement. And I think this is something that some of the questions pointed to, is that we don't necessarily have these good understandings, but we could make that understanding available as we do our regular program related pre-assessments. Standardized price lists, for example, for cash flows, so that we have a similar understanding of kind of the prices for discrete lists. What should be on those lists? That's a good question. For example, technological innovation for donors, the use of blockchain formatted one-to-many agreements, something that I mentioned at the top, enabling multiple producers to fulfill singular large orders. Some key sort of takeaways from information sharing, since we have the time. Engaging with the ground bargain commitments made by donors in order to share ways that which local procurement can support donors towards these commitments. Now, the localization is not new, right? It's been around for quite a while, and the ground bargain and the charge for change are key ways that has been solidified. But it doesn't remain rhetoric. I've recently been doing a literature review about where we're at sort of in the sector, and it's a bit unclear what localization really means. So engaging directly with that and sharing the best possible information. Webinars, events, podcasts, case studies, showcasing best practice that currently exists in local procurement in order to achieve a critical mass of will towards localized supply. And finally, policy advice, which, as I mentioned, there is a key element here in the donor. Setting a policy agenda for later down the supply chain in order to locate spaces, means and windows of opportunities to enhance local procurement, and maybe giving tailored policy advice to donors offer emerging tech. But it's not the only place where we could offer policy advice. The Local Procurement Learning Partnership is a learning partnership after all, so exploring best practice options for linking procurement in emergencies with cash voucher assistance, for example, with BSL, livelihoods and value chain for NFI markets. Having a framework for non-traditional sellers, including small manufacturing and digital innovation hubs, to engage with humanitarian response plans at a national level can really help to improve the national resiliency and to integrate them into our market understandings at that level. As I said, this framework is huge, and I do appreciate that it's a lot to throw at you guys, which is why we're running our events later in the year about this. This is in its second iteration and will be finalised before our second steering group meeting at the end of June. I want to talk about these 5 key pillars as well, unless there are any questions about the ways those activities are translating. That's the chat. Let me finally just present the strategic pillars then. So the strategic focus in order to support local procurement for our buyers. So these are NGOs and UN agencies through better understandings of the barriers and connection to quality compliant sellers. The sellers being vendors and manufacturers. So not just people that are performing the supplying, but also where are those supplies coming from? Is it local if it's being supplied at a local market but made very far away? So we've used the sellers pillar to kind of catch both of those programs. This is is the enhanced procurement understanding that we've had before. So advocating for active market recovery programming and sustainable supply chain management, resiliency building. Finance, this is because this is such a common barrier to local markets engagement in aid and resiliency building initiatives, including financial products, partners and mechanisms to improve the cash flow. It's vitally, incredibly critical, otherwise the learning partnership will be stuck with more complex solutions. And finally, the donors. The donors of aid represent a huge amount of the sway that we have. So working with them to enable them to allow enhanced interaction with local populations by ways of practitioner procurement, levelling the playing field to allow local and non-traditional actors to engage, and supporting donors toward ground bargain commitments. Actually, I would be very interested to hear from Alexi, because one of the things that is now occurring to me is that none of these pillars necessarily cover the transportation solution provider. Alexi, if you're still in the room, I would love to know which of these pillars you feel resonates most with you. if any of them, or whether you feel like none of this is really speaking to you yourself as a transportation solution provider. HELiX is still in the room. They may have left. I think they may have left. We're going to have to follow up with him afterwards. I'd be interested to know how they feel about this. Okay, are there any further comments on this framework at this time? Would anyone here be interested in joining the, go back to our, so as I said, if you're interested in joining us to talk more about this framework for activities, the localprocurement.org splash page is the best way of getting in touch, getting onto our mailing list. My name is Claire Travers. You can always email me, claire.travers@humanitarianlogistics.org. And again, if you'd like to provide a testimonial about your experiences during COVID for October to February to October of 2020, I really appreciate that as well. And the final slide is just a thank you for your attention. This has been a bit quicker than we were expecting because people had slightly less talk to do. But I'm really happy to have had your attention for the time I have. And I will now take any questions, or I suppose we can let people filter in and out of the session. Thank you.
Okay, I think that's the wrap up from this session. Thank you so much, Ms. Claire Lewis from the Humanitarian Logistics Association. So before we end our session, I would like to invite all the participants in the session to turn on your camera. Maybe we could take a quick photo session.
Absolutely, let's do that. Let me fix my hair.
Maybe you can grab your lipstick or maybe compact powder in a quick way.
I actually do have lipstick sitting right here. Isn't that amazing? Maybe this one. Hello, everybody. Nice to see everyone's little faces.
Yes, finally we can see the faces from our participants.
Yeah. I hope everyone found this a good session. Have we got enough people off on their camera at the moment, or not so much?
I think not all the participants are available now for taking a picture. Okay, maybe we can just proceed now.
Sure.
I will just count 1, 2, 3. Okay, I think that's all. Thank you very much for coming and logging in the session. So I would like to hear also from you guys. To fill out our feedback session, you can see the link in the chat box. So